I probably won't need this. Normally when I talk to a room like this, I just put on what my kids call my teacher voice, right? So I normally don't need a microphone, but thank you, Dr. Johanian, for asking me to speak about this, what I consider a very, very important subject. And what we decided that I would speak on is the historical significance of the philosophy of Zarathustra and his teaching to all of the world. Because it was Zarathustra who said himself, is that my teaching is not for one people, not for one clan, or not for one tribe, it's for the whole world, he said. And it has turned out to be just the case. Okay? So, in order to understand the importance of Zarathustra and his philosophy, we have to look at the world that Zarathustra was born into. The world had been taken over by corrupt kings who were only lusted after gold and power, and they kept the common hardworking people down. If we look at the true definition of the word king, it literally means the highest and most powerful warrior. Kings were nothing more than warriors. And the guy who could kill more people than anybody else, he becomes the king. And he rules all of the other common people through fear and oppression. This is the world that Zoroaster came into. Right? Now, who were the gods of these kings? They had to be war gods. So for thousands and thousands of years, the most important gods were the war gods. Now, how do you venerate? How do you worship a war god? You have to kill something. This is why human beings practiced blood sacrifice for thousands of years. Even human sacrifice, because this is the only way that you worship and appease a war god, right? So this required a new class of people to come, because all of these elaborate rituals and ceremonies, it required people to have special training. So it rose the class of the priests, because they were the only ones who knew how to do the sacrifices correctly. So as Zarathustra tells us, the world he comes into was ruled by corrupt and powerful kings and priests. And the common hardworking people that did all the work were kept down. But Zarathustra changed all of that. Right? The first thing, and we're talking 1800, almost 4,000 years ago, 1800 BC. We are quite sure how long ago this is because of the language of the Gathas. Very close cousin to Sanskrit, a very ancient language. So we know how old and how long ago the teachings of Zarathustra came to us. So what did he say? Most importantly, he said, there's only one God. There's not these hundreds of war gods. There's only one God. And he's not a God of war. He's a God of life. He's a God of light and wisdom, the wise God. And a wise God does not need blood sacrifice, does not want blood sacrifice. He wants only three things. He wants his people to be good. How do we do that? Zarathustra gives us only three laws, three rules. To have good thoughts, good positive thought, good positive words, and good positive action or deeds. And this changes everything. He gives us the concept of the Hashavairya. or the government that is chosen by the people. What a concept, right? Where people get to choose their own leaders, political leaders, and their own religious leaders, right? He gives us the concept that the greatest gift that God has given us is Mother Earth, the earth itself. And he tells us that because this is such a great and wonderful gift from God, the wise God, that it is our duty to take care of it. So he gives us the first concept of ecology and taking care of the earth, right? And one of the most important things he gives us is the equality of all men and women. Very clearly. In the Gathas, he insists that his own daughter select her own husband, using wisdom to make the choice. Right? In fact, in a paper that was recently written by Dr. Johanian, he makes the point that whenever Zarathushtra speaks to the people, he mentions both men and women both at the same time. And virtually every time mentions women first. Whenever he addresses them or makes reference to them, he says, to the women and the men, as if he is purposely emphasizing the fact that the women are equal to the men. Okay. Now, this is what we would call, and what we later call in the Greek philosophy, a pure philosophy. And it was throughout these 4,000 years, since the time of Zarathustra, there has been many attempts to put his philosophy into practice. Most have failed, of course. But the reason that it's so important that we remember his legacy and the changes he made is because throughout the world, even to this day, wherever the philosophy of Zarathustra has been rejected or refused to be put into practice, okay, it is still being ruled by the corrupt Kavis and Karapans. The people who lust only for power and gold. Well, about 500 years after the time of Zarathustra, at a time when his teachings had spread throughout the ancient world, there was even a Pharaoh of Egypt that many, including myself, believe had heard about these philosophies and had embraced them. His name was Amenhotep IV, which means the defender of the Most High God. Now, the Most High God was a god of war. Okay? But this Pharaoh, he came in, when he gained power, he changed everything, including his own name. He changed his name to Akhenaten, the worshiper of the one God. Now, is that a coincidence? I don't think so. And he changed, for 17 years, he changed everything about Egyptian religion, from worshiping the gods of war. And Akhenaten said, there's only one God, and he is a God of light and wisdom. And a God of light and wisdom does not need all of these blood sacrifices. And instead of all of these elaborate, complicated rituals of sacrifice, Akhenaten changed the religion to celebrate life. And I don't know if many of you know what the symbol of life is to the ancient Egyptians, the Ankh, which some say is a precursor to the Christian cross. Okay? And the other thing that Akhenaten does is he changes the religion so that the most important holy, sacred people or holy people are women. He surrounds all of Egypt with women who speak of the gift of life instead of the sacrifice of the gods of war. Okay. Then there comes a time at the end of the, oh, by the way, he only lasted 17 years, and the war god, the followers of the war gods came back up and either drove him out or did away with him one way or the other. But his reign lasted for 17 years. Very, very important, because many see him as the first progenitor of the concept of the one God. Of course, we know that's not true, right? After that, for a time, there's another man who is venerated as a great teacher. His name, toward the end of the Egyptian era, going into the Greek era, is named Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes, the 3 times blessed. Now, what would be those 3 blessings? I think we know. The good thought, the good words, and the good deeds. To me, this makes sense to me. Okay? And Hermes Trismegistus, he teaches that the God of the universe is the mind of the universe. Very clearly related to the God of wisdom, or the wise God. Okay? So much so that at this time there are many books that were written back in these days. Things like the Chaldean oracles of Zoroaster. Now we know that Zoroaster didn't write this, right? But these ancient philosophers so loved Zoroaster and his philosophies that they venerated him in this way, right? Then, of course, comes the time about 800 years after the time of Akhenaten the Egyptian, comes the time of Cyrus the Great, who goes out and creates the largest and most powerful empire the world has ever seen. Much larger and more powerful than the Greek and the Roman empires later on. And he does it in almost a bloodless campaign. Most importantly, he marches into Babylon and does not kill one person. He takes over the whole country of Babylon. And what does he do? He sets all of the slave tribes of Babylon. He sets them free, including the Jews and the Hebrews, right? We know even in the old book, the old Hebrew book, they pay homage to Cyrus, calling him the first Meshach, or the first Messiah, literally meaning the Savior. And indeed, we know that the Jewish people would not exist if it was not for Cyrus the Great. And we have corroboration from this, not just in the Old Testament, which spends many, many books talking about what Cyrus did for the people, but we also have it from archaeology. Most importantly, the cylinder of Cyrus. If you ever see it, you know what I'm talking about. It was a cylinder that detailed the empirical edict of Cyrus when he marches into Babylon. He says that and this is considered to be the very first declaration of human rights in all of history. He says that the most important thing in life is freedom. And I'm setting you free to go back home. Not only that, but you have the freedom to worship whatever God you want. I wonder where he got that. You know? And he even sends the Jewish people home with money to rebuild their own kingdom back in Israel. And sends much of the important furniture and tools that were stolen out of their own temple by the Babylonians. This is why he is called the first Messiah, right? The first Messiah. And by the way, that scroll, the cylinder of Cyrus, is chiseled into above the door frame, the main entrance of the United Nations building in New York City. And underneath it, it clearly states the first Declaration of Human Rights. Something to be proud of. Then we can move forward to about 150 years later to the Greek philosophers, what we call the Socratic philosophers. First, let's look what the word philosophy means. Philosophia in Greek literally means the love of wisdom. Is this not what Zarathushtra was talking about? Of course it was. This is why Zarathushtra is called by the Greek philosophers as the first philosopher. Why? Because philosophy requires questions to be asked. How did all this happen? What is your true nature, God? Right? And why is Zarathustra the first philosopher? Because he's the first one to ask the questions, which he very clearly states in the Gathas. That's where he started. Guide me, God. Please tell me how to teach the rest of the world about your true nature. Now, the Socratic philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Xenophon, Aristotle, they all considered Zoroaster the first one in the world to ask the important questions. In fact, Xenophon, one of the compatriots of Plato, he writes a whole book about the philosophies of Cyrus the Great. And he calls it The Education of Cyrus. We all know where Cyrus got his education, don't we? Of course. This is how important the legacy of Zoroaster was throughout all of these hundreds and hundreds of years. Right? Which finally brings us to Jesus Christ. In the old book of the Bible, okay, the name of God was El Shaddai, which literally means the Most High God. And very clearly, in many passages of the Old Testament, he clearly states, even when he is speaking about himself, God, El Shaddai says, I am a vengeful God. I am a God of war. Very clearly. Right? But Jesus changes all of that. Right? In the new book, Jesus comes out, he says, God is a God of light and wisdom. In many passages. Where have we heard that? Very clear legacy from the ancient pure philosophy of Zarathushtra. Okay? And by the way, who is it that it states right in the Bible? Who were the first people to visit and pay homage to the new king with the new philosophy? It was the Magi. In that day, in that language, the Magi only had one translation. There was only one people in the whole world that were ever referred to as, quote, the Magi, and that were the priests of Zoroaster. In the Bible, where did they come from? They came from the east. They came from Persia. How did they find them? They followed the stars. Okay? We know historically that the Zoroastrian priests were very enlightened and very highly scientific and educated, that they were the world's top astronomers and astrologers, scientists, if you will. And they are the first ones to come from the east and pay homage to Jesus Christ and bring him gifts. Right? There is one of the Gospels calls them the three kings, but this is a very short passage and a very questionable translation of that passage. But the bulk of all the passages refer to them as the wise men. And they only came from one place, right? Now, we can skip forward to many, almost 2,000 years, to the time when we think the Hashavarya might actually be put into practice for the first time. And that is if, oh, by the way, the philosophers, Plato said, the true kingdom will never come true until the kings become philosophers. Again, what is philosopher? A lover of wisdom. Plato left that with us. So we know that the patriot fathers in the New World, when they wanted to create a new life based on, of all things, freedom and equality. Now we know it didn't all happen all at once, right? But the patriot's father said, the people must be able to choose their own leaders. They must have freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of action so that they can pursue their own happiness. And I mean, has it been perfect? Of course not. Zarathustra seems to have known that it would take many, many struggles, many, many eons of time. But he always left a little glimmer of hope, saying that eventually, human beings, we will get it right if we continue to work hard at it. And we have. Again, is it perfect? No. But is there hope? I have to say yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So relevant.
Oh.
So amazing. Thank you so much.